Tired of cycling coverage cluttered with ads and clickbait? Want in-depth analysis, honest reviews, and a community of like-minded riders? Escape Collective is different. We're member-funded, so you are our priority. Get exclusive bonus episodes, insider newsletters, and connect directly with top cycling journalists. I promise I didn't write that last bit. I am just reading the script out. Join us at escapecollective.com/join.
Welcome back to Placeholder Podcast, everybody. Kaylee Fretz, we got a fantastic show for you. The Giro d'Italia is coming. The Vuelta a España Fem is on right now. Now, Femenina, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's Spanish. That's the word I'm looking
They're
for.
not French. It's not Fem.
They're not French. Joining us today, you just heard Dane Cash. Welcome, Dane.
Hey, Kelly.
How are the Phillies doing so far this year?
They lost last night, but the Phillies are doing actually quite well. They're one of the best teams out there right now, so it's great. I'm wearing a t-shirt. The listeners won't know why you asked me that question. I think that's because I'm wearing a t-shirt. I like to
an element of mystery to the podcast. I think when we just discuss things that they can't see. Johnny Long, welcome back.
Hey, I just want to say the Phillies mascot is the dumbest mascot I've ever seen.
Do you mean the best mascot in the history of world sport? Because I think most people would disagree with you, Johnny.
Yeah, they'd be wrong.
What is the Phillies mascot?
The Philly Fanatic. He reinvented mascots. He's the inspiration for Gritty, which, created a whole new legion of young fans.
I like Gritty.
Crazy mascots.
I like Gritty.
Gritty's great.
Yeah, well, Gritty's very much a sort of a development of the Fanatic. So go check him out.
Really?
If you're listening at home, go look up the Philly Fanatic. He's an absurd green beast. He has no connection to anything real, but he's quite amazing.
Here's Tyson and Muppets.
And finally, welcome to the show, Kit. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you.
Well, we do have a lot to get through today. We're gonna talk Giro, but only a bit of sort of Giro preview. I think first of all, there's a big course preview for the Giro over on the How the Races Won podcast, right, Dane?
That's let's say medium course preview.
A medium course preview.
Medium course.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about favorites, but we're going to do it in a slightly unusual way. And we're also going to provide some of our hipster picks, I think, for the race, meaning the riders that we were watching before they got big, that sort of thing. We're going to look at some of the names that are floating around the start list. We're going to defend the Giro before it even happens. We're going to defend the Giro no matter what happens, frankly, because we love the Giro and we're excited about the Giro. And there's just been some negativity around the Giro, around the classics, a little bit from us, to be perfectly honest. And we're going to,
I would say,
a little bit. We're going to defend these bike races. We're going to talk about that as well. Let's get right into the Giro d'Italia. The Giro kicks off this weekend. Saturday or Sunday? Dane, you tell me.
Yeah, I don't know. We just switched the whole format of this. The listeners won't know, but you were editing the run sheet moments ago. So now you're throwing in way before I'm ready to talk about the Giro. Who's even racing the Giro?
It's on Saturday.
It starts
on Saturday, May 4th.
Yeah.
In Turin. With actually, this is pretty cool. The Giro this year really doesn't waste any time at all getting exciting. So if you're going into the Giro thinking, I could just wait till the second and third week to watch, don't do that. It's actually quite a lot of hilly stages in the early going. So yeah, Saturday kicks off, and there's going to be plenty of action from the first few stages.
Now, obviously, there is one heavy favorite for this Giro d'Italia. Who would that be?
That would be Tadej Pogačar, who is making his Giro debut. And yes, he's a heavy favorite, and I would even say he's somehow a heavier favorite than I would have even thought possible. If you look with the bookies, Johnny screenshotted some odds this morning, and I think that Tadej Pogačar is a very heavy favorite. But crashes happen, crazy stuff happens. I don't think any one rider is even remotely close to him as a favorite. But his odds are so short that I don't know why anybody would put money on it. You're not even going to win any money. It's such a tiny amount that you'd win if he won, and yet he could crash. You never know. But yeah, Tadej Pogačar is the answer to your question, Kaylee. Heavy favorite.
Shall I just read out some of the odds and who the bookies, how they rank everyone else?
I think that's a good way to go, because if you asked me who the favorites are, I would also probably point to those same riders who are up there with Tadej Pogačar.
So yeah, this is proper old-fashioned English odds. Tadej Pogačar is way under even, so I think that's the equivalent of being minus in the hundreds in American odds. But that, Pogačar, that's not interesting. Geraint Thomas is obviously second favourite, about 5-1. But then after that is where it gets kind of mad because they've got Romain Bardet. Remember him? He's 16-1. Then the other guys in the teens and early 20s are Ben O'Connor, Antonio Tiberi, who he's 5th favourite for the Giro, ahead of his
wild.
teammate Damiano Caruso, Danny Martinez, Kian Utebrücker, Tiemann Arensman. That's the top 9. Has everyone avoided the Giro? Is every other...
Well, they always do, though. I mean, that's pretty normal.
I mean, if you're anybody why would you go to the Giro this year? You've seen Tadej Pogačar is going to the Giro. You know that that this year is your best chance. And now, with Jonas Vingegaard injured, it's really your best chance to win a Tour de France in probably this decade, right? So if you are anybody else with a half a chance of getting yourself a Tour de France victory, you're going to the Tour this year. Now, unfortunately, I think that Pogačar probably could win both, but we've talked a little bit about that already. These are funny odds, though. I should say, like, we're not really. I'm not really a betting person.
Yeah,
I think
this
the odds
is going
are just
right over
more,
my head, to be honest. But
they're just more interesting to kind of talk about and think about because it's just a nice way to put numbers on.
We're not a gambling show.
We're not, but they're very useful for talking about favorites. I mean, if you wanted to know who the favorites for Roubaix and Flanders were, if you looked at the odds, they would have told you who the guy that was going to win was.
Do we feel like the bookies have this one wrong? I mean, Dane, you kind of hinted at this earlier, which is that, Tadej Pogačar is the massive favorite for this race. But there's sort of like the entire field has a better chance, I think, than these odds are giving them credit for.
I think that's accurate.
Because Pogačar could crash or get sick or whatever.
Yeah. No, I think that's accurate. To be fair, I still think Tadej Pogačar will win the race. But I think that the odds are set such that, like, it just seems like it's as if it's inevitable that he will win, and I do not think it is inevitable. The other thing is, it's not just the bookies that determine. I mean, eventually you get people betting, and that will move the odds. So clearly, other people also think that Tadej Pogačar is going to win this race, such that he is now paying out very little to win. Yeah, but again, we're talking about this not because we're a betting show, but because it's relevant to talking about favorites.
He did win Liège by a greater margin than some Grand Tours.
Yeah, that's true.
That is true. But I would say that at Liège, you didn't have quite as many people like Geraint Thomas, who I think will at least put up a fight if he doesn't crash out of the race. That could also happen.
Ooh,
it does mean, getting back to the route, that next week, the first week is going to be, well, especially as it's so hilly, it should be a stonking week, especially as we've heard, that I think we talked last week about how much Pogačar could win the Giro by, and he's not going to win it by half an hour because he will be saving probably a little bit for the Tour. But it means that next week, it's an extra 2 weeks before the Tour de France. If he's in the pink jersey by stage 9, then he's got, well, not 2 weeks to rest, obviously. But next week, considering it is so hilly, it's not as hilly as the profiles would suggest. Stage 5's profile made my jaw land on the floor this morning but the highest altitude is 600 meters. But because of the way that the graph has been laid out, it looks like it's about 3,000. But anyway, so next week should be fantastic.
ASO is the only race organizer that does profiles correctly. RCS does them hilariously.
Agreed.
Like, you can't, if you just look at them and you don't actually check what the y-axis is, what the scale is, you just like, wow, this is a mountain stage, and it turns out it's like Mark Cavendish wins, right? Yeah. They need to fix that. Can we actually do, before we go anywhere, we do want to do a bit of like, okay, for the listeners out there, what is this Giro going to look like in terms of the route? So, like, Dane, give me kind of what is the expected narrative arc of this coming Giro d'Italia based on route alone?
Okay, I would say the expected narrative arc, I'm going to, if it's not that Tadej Pogačar takes the lead on stage 1 and holds it for 20 days, which it really might, I think maybe it's equally as likely that there's about a week of your, Alexei Lutsenko types, guys who are punchy and can go for an attack and who won't draw as much attention from Pogačar, vying for pink for the first week or so. And also in that week, we're going to see a lot of pretenders drop out of contention. And then in the middle of the second week, we're going to see Tadej Pogačar surge into the lead. And then by the end of the race, he'll have quite a handy lead. But yeah, there will be opportunities in that first week for activity. There's gravel in Tuscany on the horizon as well. That should be exciting. And I think we're going to see mostly stage hunter battles in the first week, just because maybe Pogačar will let it happen.
So there you go. So Dane, you think it's going to be potentially some action early on, likely a Pogačar sort of middle of the race, and then he will probably be able to hold on throughout. The course itself, it starts in the northwest corner of Italy, as you said, in Turin, works its way down sort of the Mediterranean coast a little bit, down toward Napoli and Pompeii, then makes its way back up the Adriatic coast a little bit, which is actually where we're going to be for the Tour de France as well, which is fun. And then over into kind of the Dolomites area, Friuli, et cetera, up in the sort of northeast of the country. So I think that you're right, that the first week is going to be interesting, provided Pogačar does not decide to take pink on day one, which I don't think he will. Maybe he will, but I don't think he will. And then we have a bit of a break, and then mountains in the middle and mountains at the end. That's roughly how this Giro is going to go. But it's a nicely spread out route. It's a nicely, they sort of put interesting stages all throughout the 3 weeks, I think. And so it's one that you really are going to want to tune into, I think, most days and catch up on what's going on. And there's going to, I think, even if Pogačar's winning by 8 minutes, I think there's going to be plenty to watch over the next 3 weeks.
But plenty of big stage hunter names as well. Like the GC battle, yes, it might be a pretty clear Pogačar victory, assuming he doesn't crash. But the sprinter field is great. There's a lot of sort of guys who can go for the breakaway type wins. There's plenty of big names here that are just not the GC guys.
Well, so if you're a breakaway rider, you're kind of you have the exact opposite thought as the GC guys, right? I said all the GC guys are going to want to go to the Tour de France this year because they are seeing an opportunity at the Tour de France. If you're a breakaway rider and you're like, well, Pogačar's going to win this thing by 12 minutes, which means the break is going to go to the line a lot this year, right? Because UAE is not going to care. UAE's, if he's that far ahead of everybody else in the sort of the GC field, none of the other GC riders are going to haul back breakaways. UAE is going to haul back breakaways. This is going to be, it's a stage hunter's paradise, I think, for the next 3 weeks. So that's going to be, I think, one of the big storylines of those 3 weeks is who can pick up a stage win.
Well, and also it's those stage hunter guys who then can sneak into the top 10 on GC late on, which is kind of sometimes really fun. Like Ben O'Connor at the Tour, that was super fun.
Yep.
Can't remember anyone else off the top of my head. That was just the one. But if you're Pogačar and you're looking at doing the Giro Tour double, surely you race the opening week like it's just a 1 week stage race, build up a gap of like 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's over. And then you spend the next 2 weeks, like, I don't know, just turning the legs. Would that work?
I think that would work. That's what he's going to do, right? Let's go into, we have a couple questions for the esteemed panel here today. The first one related to stage hunting, because we do think that this is going to be a stage hunter's Giro. So I need all three of you, to pick me a dark horse rider, the hipster's pick, somebody who has never won a Grand Tour stage before, and preferably isn't really on the radar of sort of the half engaged cycling fan, which obviously none of our listeners would be, but the average cycling fan. Who do you think is going to win a stage of this Giro?
I'll go, because I think other people are going to say this name. Lawrence Pithy.
Oy.
Yeah, that does seem to be borderline, not even that much of a dark horse, Johnny, but all right.
I'd say, is he a hipster pick anymore?
Yeah, I'm not
surely. Has he
all
done
of
a
our
Grand
listeners
Tour
from
before?
Down Under will say that he's
not done a Grand Tour before.
Yeah, he's a debutant.
It's a different thing, different
That's
frogs,
true.
different times.
Yes, but when Tadej Pogačar did his first Grand Tour, he won 3 stages. I know they're not
And
the same
that was
rider,
and he was a dark horse. That
that's
was crazy.
True, fair enough. Yeah. He had just won the Tour of California. But
I'd like to point out, not to totally derail everybody here, but I did speak to a young Tadej Pogačar at the Tour of California that year.
Yeah.
And so if anybody read my article, then they would know not to assume he was a dark horse. Anyway, Johnny, I don't want to derail your pick because I think Pithy's a good pick. I think it's a fine pick.
It's definitely a good pick, whether he's a dark horse.
Wow.
Questionable. We'll put it to the audience. Do we think Lawrence Pithy is a dark horse?
I'll go with someone similarly, probably familiar to the audience down under. Maybe. Marius Mayerhofer, German rider,
Okay,
who won Cadell's race. Well, he won Cadell's race last year. So anybody who was hanging out on the Great Ocean Road in 2023 would know him, but not someone.
That's very hipstery, though.
It
You
not
had to
someone
be there
who has
to.
won a
okay,
Grand
you
Tour.
did it.
Yeah.
Okay. I see what we're doing now.
And Mayerhofer, the Tutor Pro Cycling team, has been really quite impressive the last few weeks here as
they're
a
riding
second
high.
division team. So I think they have a chance, and Mayerhofer's quite good.
Kit?
Hello. I think I'm going to go with, I'm still juggling 2 names. I'll go with Torsten Trien,
Mm.
who transferred from Uno X to Bahrain Victorious over the winter. Won't hold that against him too much. But I don't know. He's a good climber. He's got a heartwarming story. One of the routine medical checks, they found a lump in one of his testicles and had to have it removed. So he had a bit of a comeback from that. He raced the Tour last year and raced most of it with, I think, a broken elbow, or at least race until he had to finish with a broken elbow. Anyway, Bahrain Victorious obviously believe in him. I believe in him, I guess. He's done pretty well at second stage of the Tour of the Alps last year. In those, maybe in the second or third week in some of the medium mountains, get him up there in a 3-up sprint, maybe with some other skinny lads. Be a good story. Good to see him win.
I like that one. That's a solid hipster pick. Mine is a little bit more on the Johnny Long side, particularly for anybody who's been paying attention in the last couple of weeks. So the Tour de Romandie is kind of like the Giro's Dauphiné, right? It's often used as a bit sort of.
Not for the GC riders, but
stage hunters. Maybe.
You understand what I'm saying. So it's like similar in time-ish, and often riders will sort of go there as a final tune-up sort of thing. And one of the riders that really impressed this year was Florian Lipowitz, the Bora Hansgrohe rider, 23 years old, clearly quite a good climber, ended up third overall, and was, I think, quite crucially, second on stage 4, which is the stage that Richard Carapaz won.
Queen stage.
Beat Carlos Rodriguez, the Queen stage. Beat Enric Mas, beat Bernal, Vlasov, a whole bunch of Teo Gegenhardt, bunch of big names, and appears to be sort of a name for the future. He's kind of a bit bigger, at least according to the official stats, than a lot of the GC riders are, sort of almost 70 kilos, which we've seen quite a few sort of smaller GC riders as of late. So I'm interested to see how he does. Over 3 weeks, the tiny guys tend to do quite well in general, but who knows? He's, I wouldn't say he popped out of nowhere in the last couple of weeks, but it really sort of forced him onto the radar. Again, really no longer a hipster pick after those results, but if you were listening to Florian Lipowitz 2 years ago, you can now claim that you were listening before anybody heard about him.
And what's interesting about him is that he clearly has a sprint on him based on how quickly he came up that finishing straight on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So if he comes to the finish with a group, he could very well nab a stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kelly stole my pick, but I believe in Torsten.
I do think also Bora is going to give its riders all kinds of stage hunting opportunities. They had planned, I think, to be a little bit more GC focused with a couple of different riders, Leonard Kamna being the one that kind of changed everything when he was hit by a driver at the start of the month. And now I think they're going to be a little bit more stage hunting focused. And much to the chagrin of Emmanuel Buchmann, who posted something on Instagram griping about not being selected, which was, I feel bad for him, but it was also a really great Instagram post. So I'm kind of glad that he did it.
Hashtag free emu.
Hashtag free emu.
Are first of all, didn't know that was his nickname.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Like that. Doesn't quite feel like Freelanda to me. It kind of feels like he just
frequently pop up in the top 10 GC.
Yeah, he's been fourth at the Tour de France.
Yeah. He's that kind of invisible rider who is just kind of there, but
you know what he's great for?
What's that?
You know, he's great for Bike Grid.
Oh yeah, that's a good name for Bike Grid.
He is a solid,
but
he's
no
a solid
longer
Bike Grid
because
name.
you've said his name on the podcast, and now everyone's going to think of him. And
like
only listeners, only the real ones.
Hugh Carthy as well. He's in that, the most 8th rider ever. Those guys.
All right, question number 2 for the Giro. Tadej Pogačar is going to win the Giro, probably. We can clip this up and play it back when he doesn't in 4 weeks. But let's just put our thinking caps on. Let's get a little creative. How does Tadej Pogačar not win this Giro d'Italia? And I don't want he fell down, crashed off a cliff. Don't want any of that stuff. How does he not win this Giro?
I want to get in an earnest answer before everybody says funny things that make me look boring. So you can build off of this and say whatever you need to say after this. But I will. My earnest answer is that somebody will try to get away early on in this race, like an Alexei Lutsenko, and they'll be allowed to get away. And then they'll just oops their way into keeping the jersey, which isn't exactly what happened at the Vuelta with Sepp Kuss, but it's not that far off when he got into an early break and then happened to be quite a good rider who could hold on to it. And I think an Alexei Lutsenko or someone else who is quite a good rider, that is maybe what happens, where Pogačar doesn't see them as that big of a threat, and that might be how they get clear, other than the crashing scenario.
If Lutsenko wins, it's very good for my draft team.
Oh, yes. Yeah, which you need some help.
Which is chaotic.
You're
right
vying
now.
for last place with me right now.
There's your earnest answer. Somebody anticipates. We were talking about anticipating in last week's show and how that's how you had to beat Pogačar in races like Liège, and it's probably also true of the Giro, to be perfectly honest. So anticipation is Dane's answer. Kit, do you have an earnest or unearnest answer?
I couldn't come up with an earnest answer because I think, Dane's got about the only one that is potential. Well, I was trying to be funny. It's not very easy with this. I don't know. I guess my conclusion is that the only way Pogačar is not going to win the only way he's going to lose the Giro is by no fault of his own. So crashing, but that's not an answer I'm allowed to give. So I'm going to go with, and no offense to team staff, which I'm sure and at UAE especially are incredibly professional. But let's say there's a chaotic stage, maybe the gravel stage. Pogačar's in pink already, not white or yellow, his preferred colours. And the team car loses track of him. He needs a bike change. He ends up 15 minutes out the back, and it's goodbye GC.
That's like
or it's a Roglic and his team car stopping for a pee situation. So yeah, that's all I could come up with, I'm afraid.
I think Visma would love that because then it would sort of take the spotlight off of them for many of their various team car foibles over the last year or so.
I don't see it happening. Johnny?
No, me neither.
Well, if you didn't like that one, you're going to like this one even less. 2 words for the group. Nairo Quintana.
Oh,
yeah.
He's back.
I like that, actually.
He's back. He may have been injured and ill, but that doesn't matter when you're Nairo Quintana and you've got a pharmacy in your backpack. He's turning
He's
up
also
to
the king of
Giro.
excuses.
Sorry?
He's also the king of excuses. He said he's turning up to go for stages. So usually he'd have a knee issue or something in the past.
He's doing the
So
Van der Poel
he's-
where it's like, my legs, not so good. He's had a year off. I mean, imagine if any one of us in our regular jobs had a year off and then came back afterwards. You'd be ready to go. You'd be rested. You'd actually be probably looking forward to it because you've, not been to a Grand Tour in a while. It's not the
Gotta prove yourself.
drudgery of every day of getting up on the podium and da-da-da. He's going to be there for it. And it's going to be so good when he wins and everyone loses their mind. Because despite his problems of the past couple of years and whatnot, Nairo winning a comeback Giro would be amazing. The discourse.
I mean, the discourse,
We'd be busy.
The banter, the available banter, should that happen, would just be phenomenal. My answer is hubris.
Ooh.
Ooh.
My answer is hubris, which I mean, so it could go either way. Either he could sort of take pink early and then kind of settle in, and then someone slowly chips away, and then Pogačar has a bad day, which he's had before, right? Let's think back. He's had bad days before. Has the bad day and the wrong day. Maybe it's
I'd love it to be a bad day on stage 20, or it's really close on stage 20 when they go up Monte Grappa twice, which is a ridiculous climb.
So that's what I was going to say.
Right, sorry.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's a bad day on stage 20. Maybe it's 2 trips up Monte Grappa, finishing in Bassano del Grappa, which is a big nasty descent down to the finish line. Maybe that's what happens. Or the other way, I guess it could go is the opposite, right? So he doesn't take pink early because his hubris is such that he believes he can take it at any time, and he just sort of sits and he follows the wheels and he follows the wheels and he follows the wheels. Maybe he doesn't want to tax his team too much, right? So he doesn't want to have the pink jersey. He doesn't want to have to control the race. Although I think probably every other team will make him control the race, whether he is pink or not. But let's just pretend. Let's say Leibowitz has Lipowitz. Let's say Lipowitz has pink, and they get all the way to the Bassano del Grappa stage. And once again, one bad day, timed poorly. The hubris is such that he thought he could just take it any time, and he doesn't, and he loses the Giro. That's kind of the only way that I could see him. The only other semi-earnest answer to how he might lose this thing, because I think really it's very unlikely.
Also, Monte Grappa, what if it snows? It's the Giro.
Yeah, weather could
snow.
also be the answer there. Yeah.
Maybe that's the hubris thing, right? He
saves it for a
he's
bad
waiting.
big day.
He's waiting for that stage. He's like, I'm just going to wait and take pink on Monte Grappa, and then all of a sudden, nope, we're not going over Monte Grappa because it just snowed 3 feet. That's also possible. All right, last Giro question. So give me one unexpected thing that will almost definitely probably not happen this Giro. Kit?
Mount Vesuvius is going to erupt on them,
that's
and
a fun
they
one.
won't be able to finish.
On them.
I don't know.
Jesus Christ. They do pass right by. I mean,
Yeah, they do pass right. No,
They go right next to
it'll
it,
erupt,
yeah.
and they'll have to reroute the race. I don't know. It's not. I mean, it's not going to happen.
That would get everyone stopping saying it's boring, though.
Yeah,
That's true.
I was going to say any of what we've just said about
Other than
Pogačar not
Pogačar
winning.
winning.
I like volcano-based
true.
answers. That's fun.
Etna's blown a couple different times during the Giro. So.
Has it?
Yeah.
What, recently?
Is it during the Giro or
It
in
was-
the
well,
build up to? It definitely erupted during the
Yeah.
pandemic, and there was a bunch of Conti riders who had been at a team camp before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and they were in quarantine just by Etna, and then they weren't allowed to ride outside because Etna was erupting. I think that's correct.
Wow, there we go. That's a pretty good answer. Mine's less exciting than that. It's that Pogačar goes through the whole Giro and does nothing that's meme-worthy. And so the Giro social media team, who love like doing the pineapple on pizza stuff and and using the Italian hand emoji, just have like nothing to do the entire Giro. Like Pogačar turns up, it's all business. He's not like riding along like at the Tour when he like rides with a baguette on the rest day and does like a little joke. He just does none of that. And then everyone's there like, RCS are like, what have we even paid you for being here for?
yeah, you're like dominating the race and we can't meme it.
Exactly. And then my second one was that, and I wasn't sure if I allowed a second one, I got one. Ben O'Connor shouts at Filippo Ganna and tells him that he's not the king of Italy.
For the second time. Was that, what did he do? Did he, Warren Barguil was who he was talking about
Yeah,
before? Or
that's
yelled at
great.
before?
In the Tour, yeah, we watched it.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Dane?
Go ahead, Kelly.
Me?
Yeah.
I have to go before you?
Yep.
Why is Dane playing for time here?
Is this-
What's he got? What's he cooking up?
I just was only kind of semi-prepared for this. That's all.
I just wanted to throw in really briefly a little Mount Etna update. I just Googled it.
Oh.
Etna has had eruptions in 2001, 2002, 2004,
Wow.
2006, 8, 12, 18, 21, which if you're doing the math on those,
Yeah.
we are due.
We do. Yeah, but
Wow.
we're not going near Etna, so
We're due.
Yeah, it doesn't matter actually. Well, the only sometimes it like shuts down plane travel,
yeah,
so
yeah,
hopefully
yeah.
that's not an issue.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
we
depending
are,
on the size of the eruption, it could affect the race.
yeah. I mean, it's unlikely. I think that's. We
there
are
have
talking
been-
about unlikely, I suppose. Yeah.
They're like volcano eruptions that like change weather patterns for years.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
could happen. You know,
The one on
So-
Iceland with the name that nobody can
Exactly.
pronounce.
Hecla.
So Vesuvius, which the race is going right next to, obviously erupted in 79 AD. That was the famous one. But most recently erupted on March 17th, 1944.
Really?
So it's still active-ish. Yeah.
St. Patrick's
So
Day.
during the Second World War, they also had Mount Vesuvius erupt.
Wow.
Yep.
Bad times everywhere back then.
What a rough time.
Bad times
be-
everywhere.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. No wonder
Right.
the Italians value the Dolce Vita, just having a nice
Oh,
time.
I was wondering where you were going with that.
What did you think
Well,
I
you
was
never
going to
know when
say?
you're just going to get.
Well,
Turned
apparently
into a living museum.
in the town next to Pompeii, they do live like that. They live one day at a time. Well, it's that kind of like they are one of the happiest
Yeah.
towns in Italy because they are aware of where they are.
It's probably because they also
That's sort of
haven't
an
had
interesting vibe.
Pompeii by
Just like go
Bastille.
live somewhere where anything could.
God. Okay,
Sorry.
Dane, have you got an answer yet? We've given you
Yeah,
enough
Tadej
time.
Pogačar loses because he goes home on stage. What is it? 19. The race goes really close to Slovenia, and I think there is a risk.
Calls it quits.
He'll just pop on
He's
home
like,
and then miss the start the next day.
oops.
That actually seems like a thing that could happen. He goes home, hangs out with his friends, goes out for a night of partying because
Besides, cycling's not for him.
he's so far ahead, and then it just forgets to go back to the race.
All right. There's your Giro preview, everybody. Dane, so we can see what people search on escapecollective.com. And one of the things that was recently searched, and I'd like you to explain, please, was Dane Cash Fantasy. Could you explain yourself, please?
Is that true? I actually didn't know that. Wow.
That's true.
Well, we have this fantasy game that we have over at the website. It's our fantasy competition. We run it for, well, not just the Giro. We run it for basically all the Grand Tours. And it's a pretty cool and kind of unique and very easy to play fantasy game. And I tend to be the one who writes our little guides on how to play, how to do well. I don't know that I'm trustworthy or not as a source for that because I actually haven't done that well the last few. I want to do better. But fortunately, every Grand Tour is a new opportunity. And the Giro is coming up. So the Giro is another opportunity for you to get involved, play our fantasy game.
Well, Dane, that's a little bit less exciting, honestly, than I was kind of hoping your answer would be. But this kind of fantasy, nonetheless, quite enjoyable. And as you say, we are about to start the Giro d'Italia. The Vuelta Femenina is already on. To get into our fantasy games, head to fantasy.escapecollective.com. You can play on a web browser, or we have an app. Head into the Apple Store, or was it the Android Store? Sure. And just search Escape Fantasy, and you can pick up that app and play from there. You can create your own little leagues. I've got a couple little leagues with my buddies. Of course, we have an Escape Members League. You can see who's the best daily picker.
It's also very easy to play. You just pick one rider for every stage, and you can only pick that rider one time throughout the entire race. It's not going to take you an hour to put together a team. It's not even going to take you 10 minutes. Just go in there, pick a rider for the stage that's coming up. That's all you got to do.
So the real question is, which stage are you putting Tadej Pogačar down for? That's really...
Well, there's the strategy, right? Because we know he's probably going to win some stages. Yeah, but you want to pick the perfect one. But you don't want to wait too long because, what if he leaves the race with a crash or something and then you didn't get to use him? I don't want to give away my hints. Just go play.
All right. Fantasy.escapecollective.com or search for Escape Fantasy wherever you get your apps. Come and play. Welcome back, everybody. Before we get to Johnny Shorts, I just have an open question for the panel here. How do you do a Canadian accent?
I feel like there's a few sounds.
Yeah, there's a few sounds. I'm not going to demonstrate.
I mean, first of all, both Wade and Abby are Canadian.
And Jared.
Technically. And Jared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
He's even French-Canadian.
Well, he's an Anglo-French.
Kinda. He's an Anglo-French.
He's from Montreal.
Quebecois anyway.
We should point out why we're doing this, because Johnny's in Johnny Shorts this week has written that I must do a Canadian accent.
Don't.
Yeah.
The
sausage needs... No, I need to tell people how, because when Wade listens to this, I want him to understand this wasn't my idea.
Let's get into Johnny Shorts. I shouldn't say that.
Let's do it.
Let's get started with Johnny Shorts.
We'll begin this week's Shorts in Canadian Corner, eh? What about the Vuelta Femenina Stage 2 won by Allison Jackson? That was pretty cool how she won the bunch sprint, eh? Jumping up and down after the finish line, hugging her teammates. Seems like it meant a lot to her, eh? That's it. I'm going to stop doing the accent in a sec. Sorry.
American Luke Lamperty will make his Grand Tour debut at the Giro d'Italia alongside fellow Soudal Quickstep sprinter Tim Merlier in a squad led by Julian Alaphilippe. Ben O'Connor will be leading the line for Decathlon AG2R La Mondiale, while Tadej Pogačar's UAE Team Emirates also has a space for a sprinter, Juan Sebastian Molano. I don't know why that last sentence was so difficult to say.
Thanks, Kit, for making it seem like what I wrote was all wrong. Anyway, we'll carry on. Having been in hospital for a month after being hit by a driver in Tenerife, Leonard Kamner will finally be able to return to Germany this week after what must have been a very long month. He was on the island to prepare for the Giro d'Italia, but now even the Tour de France will likely come too soon for probably the only rider in the peloton to have had a mural spray painted onto a metro train in his honour.
Which is probably why Buchmann is not going to the Giro, because they need fresh legs at the Tour.
Where was this metro spray painted? That's cool.
This was the Giro a couple of years ago, no?
Yeah,
it was around the time of.
It actually had Mount Etna also spray painted onto it.
Yeah, and
where he won
the Amore Infinito trophy.
Yeah,
just because
it was northern Germany. It was spotted in between a few cities that are all quite close together. I like how now with Johnny Shorts, because this week they were, apart from Danes, they were quite straight and just newsy. But in the past, I've put like confusing and bad puns in there. So Kit is like trying to half read ahead each sentence to just prepare for something like terrible that she's going to say. So maybe that's something to think about for me.
So there has been a fair amount of chatter from ourselves and others about, I don't know, the excitement of particularly the men's racing calendar at the moment, and the sort of relationship between excitement and dominance, right? Because we have quite a few very dominant riders. It was exacerbated this year by injuries and illnesses and things like that really left a number of races with only one sort of top favorite. And lo and behold, those top favorites would just sort of ride away very far away from the finish line. It became a bit of a procession isn't the right word, but a predictable finale. We'll put it that way. And ahead of a Giro where that seems semi-likely, right? The exact same thing seems relatively likely to happen once again. I guess we wanted to take some time to defend the excitement of such races, right?
I took a look at the route this morning, looking at all the stage profiles, and not in a great deal of detail, but the Giro always has some brilliant individual stages, the kind of classic style. I mean, think back to the stage that Thomas de Gent won a couple of years ago when Lotto Destiny was still racing the Giro. They've opted out the past 2 years since they were downgraded to Pro Team. They're returning to Naples this year with a stage that looks on paper like a great punchy classic style stage, and it's one of many punchy classic style stages which, as we've said, are going to favour the stage hunters, the breakaways. So it could be a really good race for finding new names and seeing coming of age stories, or pro teams getting their day in the sun, like Contador's team, Polti and Pozzovivo's team. It's not his team, but he's on it. Bardiani at age 41, 42. Nice to see him do something. But yeah, it's always a race that has some dynamic stages that are really fascinating to watch in isolation of the whole race.
I think that's true of a lot of stage races that end up having kind of predictable winners. I mean, Tours de France for years had a pretty predictable pattern of winners, but racing across the board for 21 days could still be fun. You could still have great stage winners. And then the other thing I think that's really important to point out is when we talk about we get bored with the dominance of a single rider, I think that's usually in the context of it happening a lot. If it happens in isolation, it can be kind of interesting and fascinating and something that we talk about, like, wow, how dominant was that? That was great. The boredom aspect is more that we don't want to see it every race. But in isolation, if Tadej Pogačar crushes everybody at the Giro, that could still be cool. And it's worth talking about. It's a storyline. And we've heard, commenters have talked about this on some of our stories, how people will look back and say, man, I wish I'd been able to see him race. And that's something that we can enjoy while we have it.
I want to say that sometimes, a lot of the time, bike racing is kind of supposed to be a bit boring. It's like test match cricket, right? It's not supposed to be high octane, sort of Red Bull downhill, jumping out of a balloon from outer space. It's supposed to just be, it's sport at a different speed, right? There's the historical aspect to it. There's the whole culture and history. And I think it's just because we've had a weird few years where things have been really exciting because you've got closely matched like GC guys, or we've had a few exceptional like monuments. We forget so quickly the Sky years at the Tour, where not only was it quite dull in terms of the GC battle, but there wasn't even any like sort of redeeming qualities of the riders who were winning. In that the arrogance was like off the chain. There was like Dave Brailsford swanning around being kind of unlikable unless you were British and from Surrey. Whereas now at least Pogačar does it, and it's like he seems a nice guy, and it's done like in a lighthearted way where he's not like, this is us writing our names in the history books. Then there's a profoundness to it. Like even Jonas Vingegaard is probably more palatable than those Sky years. And there's nothing wrong with it. Just like there's nothing wrong with watching like a 6-hour Giro stage and nothing really happening until like Andrea Vendram wins a reduced bunch sprint or something. But the problem is when the TV coverage tries to build it up and finishes with like, that, what a stage that was. That was some of the best bike racing you will ever see. So that's kind of, that's what I think feeds
I feel like
into
you've
this whole
used
thing.
Andrea Vendram as an example for this multiple times now.
I'm just, this is called a rehashing old bit segment.
Well, I also think you made a good point about Test cricket, and the one big differentiator is, at least with the Giro, with every race, we get to watch the beautiful scenery. There is the culture and the history. And like, if you were to watch a 6-hour Test cricket match, you're watching people in a stadium.
6-hour Test cricket match. You haven't watched the Test cricket match.
Much longer than that, Dane.
That's 5 days, Dane.
If you watch a single day of a Test cricket match, yeah. Either way, you're in a stadium, right? Like you're just sitting there watching. And whereas there's whole channels that exist for like bars where you have background scenery. It's like a drone shot, and it's just like all day they just play beautiful scenery. We get that with cycling. and there's a bike race going on. So it's a lot better than a lot of other things where nothing's happening. At least you get to watch the beautiful scenery, there's history, there's castles, all that cool stuff.
Yeah, and Italy's a beautiful country, so as long as we get to see the stages and there's not too much rain to show us the broadcast, or snow, then it'd be I think it's a good. I always enjoy the Giro.
Well, and during the Giro, often the weather is miserable because they're like in the mountains or whatever. Whereas, May time in a lot of places, it's going to be sort of sunny by then. So you get to watch somewhere else having horrible weather. Meanwhile, you're sat there just, maybe on your porch if you live in America or whatever the equivalent of that is in Britain. I don't know. But yeah.
You have porches?
Your patio.
Is ours a sport for the connoisseur, would you say? Do you need to have a little bit of... I can think of a few
people who would say that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's accurate.
I mean, I think in general, if you're asked after a high octane sport, you're probably looking elsewhere, right? Yeah. What's a connoisseur or a sommelier of cycling? Like, what's the...
They definitely say
Daniel Fried comes to mind. Yeah.
No, chapeau, yeah.
I mean, some of my favourite memories of watching the Tour de France, for instance. So in the summer, you've got all day to yourself. You go for a ride in the morning, you come back, you have a massive lunch, put the TV on, maybe open the French doors, have a beer, have another beer, have a chat with your pals, keep watching the Tour de France. It's just it's a very leisurely, and I probably wouldn't watch all day of a sprint stage, but it is a bit. I think Test cricket is a good analogy for Grand Tour racing. It certainly, and yes, there are days when you are glued to the screen. But I don't know. I think connoisseur, you do, in Grand Tour racing, we've said it so many times. Sometimes it's quite hard to get into as a beginner or to persuade your beginner friends that actually every day of a Grand Tour can be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I could buy into that.
Kit, if the doors weren't French, would you bother opening them or would they stay closed?
Well, I actually don't own French doors, but
this is your.
But I might throw the window
doors.
open.
Okay.
I might throw the window open, and yes, I do live in Edinburgh, and its sun does shine from time to time, but it's a nice big window.
You should just cut out a little French flag and put it on your windows, and then you can really get into the
open my French doors. Yeah.
Guys, we're talking about the Giro.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I know, but it's a Grand Tour.
Italian doors.
Yeah.
Italian doors. Yeah. I don't know. It's. I think often the Giro is more exciting than the Tour, so maybe this is the time to get our pals who don't really watch, except that they can't watch it, can they? It's not very easy to watch.
It would be like one day I can imagine myself watching the Giro and just every day like having a different like little pasta thing from that region and like a wine or something. I feel like that would be like like how Kit has her imagined French doors. I think one day in the future, like having a thing, because like we're not going to go to the Giro probably for like a number of years if we ever go. So it's the time to enjoy the Grand Tour on the TV, and then you enjoy. I
was thinking about this. So I've covered a number of Giros. I've covered 8 or something.
Really?
When I worked at Velanus, I went every year for a while. It was the first race I covered. I was at the Giro instead of my college graduation, and I love it. I love covering the Giro, and I think we do our best work on the ground at races. And so, as the person who deals with budgets and things like that, I was thinking about this recently. And I think that it would be good for us. Well, maybe not this year, unless how about this? So all of you listening out there who are not yet members, if most of you sign up, because we know there are a lot of you, we'll go to the Giro. We'll just book tickets, send Johnny to the Giro next week.
I'll add to my Tour de France, my favorite experience of the Tour de France. My favorite experience of the Giro. I was there with my uncle who is Italian on the Primož Roglic's first Grand Tour stage win at the 2016 Giro d'Italia. When it was a time trial, which is not a vintage stage to watch live on the ground. Although you do get to see the riders over and over and over and over and over again, so it is can be a fun day out. But we had a barbecue, and it did rain on us, but we had a big old barbecue, and it was a lovely long day out. And the riders had to go back; they'd backtrack along the course, so it was a bit chaotic. And the atmosphere is fantastic when the bike race is on, and you get all these different characters around. And I don't know, I would get back in a shot.
It's a far better race to go to than the Tour de France.
It's super relaxed.
I've said this for years. Yeah. As a fan, far better. Way better access, way less chaos.
Come on then.
We should go.
Last week in the Giro.
Just go sign up. I mean, this is the reality of our like, just to speak, I guess, earnestly for a moment, like this is the reality of our model, which is we have to make very careful decisions about how we use our membership revenue, right? Meaning the dollars that come in from the people listening to this podcast, the people that read our website, et cetera, would be very careful with that money. If you start to think in terms of like, okay, every hotel night that we have is a couple people's memberships, right? And so we're very careful with how we use that cash. And at the moment, unfortunately, covering the Giro doesn't really sort of clear the bar for us because the interest is just slightly lower, and we have to be very careful. I don't think that's always going to be the case, though, and I genuinely would, I guess I'll challenge people out there. Like if that's something you think we should be doing, we work for you, we work for our members, and so one, tell us, send me an email, tweet at me. Although I hardly ever on Twitter anymore. I hate Twitter, but there are many ways to reach out. editor@escapecollective.com. That goes straight to me. Tell me if that's something that you really care about, and tell me if it's the reason why you wanted to sign up, if you wanted us to go cover the Giro on the ground, if you wanted us to do daily podcasts from the Giro, just like we do, from the ground, just like we do at the Tour de France. I would love to do that, but like I said, we have to make sometimes difficult decisions around budgets and things like that, and it just doesn't. We're not quite there yet. I would like to get there, and so I don't know. That was an accidental membership push, I guess, but sign up if you want us to get there too. Like that's like Johnny just really wants to go to Italy, and that's why we need you to sign up. No, we want to be able to produce like the same level of content that we do from the Tour de France from other races. That would be amazing, right? Like that would just be, it would take our race coverage to the next level. But we need, we just need more revenue to be able to do that. I can't create money out of thin air. So. And you see, that's my plea.
Our classics, I think, was a great example of that. Got to be like roadside at Roubaix for podcasts, and that sort of thing is. Yeah. I think that's pretty cool. So hopefully others agree.
We have a quick diary from the Vuelta Femenina. Abby chatted with Kim Kadzow, the EF Education Easy Post rider. One of the revelations of Liège-Bastogne-Liège, who was in that front group, ended up in the top 10, 6th, I believe. Let's hear from Kim from the Vuelta.
Hello, my name is Abby Mickey, and I'm here to talk about La Vuelta Femenina with Jillian Elsay.
Hola.
Who's in Spain.
Yes,
actually.
In Spain, in the rain.
Jill, do you want to give the listeners a little bit of a 2-sentence summary of who you are and why you're here?
I am a Canadian, but I'm working as a sports director with a U.S. women's continental team, and we're based mostly in Europe, but then we also race in the U.S., the major stage races. So I'm over here in Europe right now at the Euro squad. Yeah, and I've known you, Abby, for a long time now. We're teammates.
Ex-teammates. But Jillian, as a DS, is very good at reading races, predicting races, picking up on little things in races. So I thought it would be fun to pick her brain about the 3rd and 4th stages of La Vuelta. We'll start with the 3rd stage, won by Marianne Vos from a slightly reduced bunch sprint. Reduced because of a crash coming into the finish. It wasn't as bad as the crashes we saw on stage 2, so that was really good because those massively impacted the finale, but this one only slightly impacted it, and it was the best sprinters in the race that came to the line together. So it was Vos versus Charlotte Kool of DSM Permanente Personnel, and Vos took the stage. It was, other than that, a pretty straightforward stage, except there was a lot of climbing, so there was a lot of tired legs at the end of the day.
I was surprised actually at how many people were at the end with that much climbing. I guess just not as difficult enough climbs yesterday as tomorrow.
The climbing starts on stage 5 of the race, but with about 12,000 meters elevation gain, the 3rd stage was deceptively harder, and I think definitely impacted the 4th stage as well, which we will talk about in just a second. But first, we have an audio diary from Kim Kadzow of EF Education Canada, who is having an incredible race, the team of the race so far. Let's hear from Kim.
Okay, so yeah, we're at stage 3 of the Vuelta. We had a pretty high last night and a nice spa hotel with the wind, dancing and celebrating with some champagne. This morning got up, went down to the beach, had a swim with a couple of teammates, and then nice luxurious breakfast. Went to the race start, and it was a hard day on the bike from kilometre 0. Hit the ground twice. Had a bike change in there as well, but a lot of crashes and a lot of chaos, and then a lot of easy riding for one rider to go off the front. And then we finished the day with some supporters coming up and wanting B-reels with us. And then, my roommate also has a really good a crush on one of the reporters, so he's been around our team a lot. And now we've ended up in a very rogue hotel in the middle of, I'm not sure where. We've got camp beds, which are in what kind of looks like a corridor, and but the food was good. So positive end on the hard day out there.
Okay. So unfortunately, we got that audio diary from Kim on stage 3, because I would love to hear what the team has to say about stage 4, which was defined by crosswinds. 114 kilometers from the line, the crosswinds started, and SD Works Pro Time, not to be caught out with a P break this year, that like what happened last year in the crosswind stage, took initiative and split the peloton apart. Most of the big names managed to find themselves in the front group, including Kasia Doma of Canyon SRAM, Elisa Lamborghini, Little Trek, Demi Vollering, obviously up there, Neve Fisher-Black, Marlon Reusser, since they were the ones who made the split. EF Education Canada with 2 riders up there, Kristen Faulkner and Allison Jackson. And the stage looked like it was coming down to a reduced bunch sprint or a reduced group sprint, with Voss potentially taking another stage and the red jersey. But in the final 6 kilometers of the race, attacks started flying over an uncategorized climb, and Kristen Faulkner was able to get away and ride solo to the finish, 10 seconds ahead of Voss, who took second and took the red jersey.
That finish, though, that was good.
There's a couple things I want to talk about. One of them is the echelons and the crosswinds, because it's important to point out who lost out in the crosswinds and who maybe gained. We had probably the 2 of the big favorites up there, potentially 3, depending on how Elisa Lamborghini is feeling on the long climbs. Little Trek have said that they're riding for Gaia Riolini, but Gaia Riolini did not make the split. She finished 2 minutes behind the leader, so she's 2 minutes down, less than 2 minutes down on Demi Vollering, now going into the climbs. So Demi Vollering, the big favorite going into the climbing stages, she made it. Rihanna Marcus, who is Visma Lisa Bikes GC rider, she made it. Neve Fisher-Black, SD Works backup rider, she made it. Obviously, Longa Borghini made it. Kasia Doma made it. So it kind of, what it did was not really take any of the favorites out, but definitely limited the pool of favorites, because you have Liana Lippert, Movistar's GC rider. She's 2 minutes down. Olivia Barrel, Movistar's other potential backup plan, she's 2 minutes down. Gaia Riolini, 2 minutes down. Mavi Garcia lost 2 minutes. And so there's a good amount of riders that I think were on the cusp of being GC riders that are now on the back foot.
SD Works, definitely biggest winners on the day with the GC side. And then I feel like Little Trek won't be super pleased for them for GC, just because it's always better to have 2 riders up there, backup plan. But at least they have one. At least they didn't lose all their GC riders in the crosswind, like Movistar and Liv. Yeah, I think for SD Works to go on the offensive, like I always tell the riders, for crosswind days, offensive is the best plan. You never want to be reacting, to that kind of wind. But
yeah, and it was kind of a toss-up whether there was even going to be enough wind to impact the race. And I think if it had been a little windier, we would have seen bigger gaps form. It was a group of 18 that made it off the front of the race. But it was enough wind to split the peloton and enough pressure from SD Works to do so. And I think, obviously, the other big winners on the day are EF Education First, who came into this race, not a World Tour team, had a phenomenal TTT. We talked about that. and then won the second stage with Allison Jackson. And when we talked about the second stage win, we didn't talk about Kristen Faulkner's phenomenal lead out, but I think you can look at that lead out and then what she did on the fourth stage with this attack that she put down this attack, and you could see Elisa Lamborghini trying to follow her and just could not follow her. So it was such an impressive attack she put down in the first place. But then to ride to the finish and gain 10 and finish with 10 seconds ahead of that group into a headwind was so impressive.
Yeah. I think I texted you. I was like, left turn, 1.5K into a headwind. Does she make it or something like that? But I feel like for EF, like it seems like they're really gelling as a team at this race. And I think you guys probably talked about it on the podcast earlier in the season, because for them to win the first race of the season, right? They won their first race. But yeah, for them to do that first race of the season, new team, and then they seem to just have gained momentum going into this stage race. Super cool finish. Yeah, and I think it seemed like Vollering went like a tiny bit early, or maybe she was trying to set up a teammate for them to counter. I don't know what you thought, but yeah, like she had Voss and Blanca Voss, not to be confused, and Royster. Maybe she's trying to set up her teammate.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're going to be worried about Faulkner for the overall. Now she's sitting third overall, 9 seconds behind Blanca Voss in second, and Mariana Voss has the red jersey going into the fifth stage. Voss is not someone that they're going to be worried about, neither is Blanca Voss. Once it comes to the climbing stages, Voss is going to start working for Rihanna Marcus, and Blanca Voss is going to turn her attention towards Demi Vollering. But I think they would have maybe just enjoyed to keep the jersey in the team for one more day. Just it's nice for Blanca Voss to be able to wear that leader's jersey. But when it comes to like trying to chase down Faulkner, it seemed like the group was just doing everything they could to try to keep the pace high without actually organizing a chase. But I mean, when you look at the caliber of riders in that group, like Marlon Reusser at one point tried to really push the pace to bring her back, and it did almost nothing. I mean, it was 20 seconds at one point and it came down to 10, but I think that was mostly because of the headwind and not because the group was chasing behind. And I think it'll be really, I'm curious to see Faulkner ride the climbing stages to come, because we've seen her win stages of the Giro before. We saw her win a stage of the Giro before with an incredible attack and basically just riding solo to the finish. Other than that, we've not seen her on long climbs like are coming in the race. So I'm not sure if she's a GC hopeful for the race. And I think they had Kim Kadzow marked as someone that they thought was going to be their GC rider, having had an incredible performance last year at the Tour of Scandinavia. I don't know how Faulkner couldn't be up there in the GC conversation now, given the strength that she's shown on multiple occasions now at the race. Perhaps she's not as good a climber as Vollering, but her strength at the moment kind of counterbalances that a little bit.
Yeah, they'll for sure have interesting conversations tonight with the DSs, and I'm sure also with Faulkner and Kim. But tomorrow's stage also, I think, could be interesting for GC and a rider like Faulkner, because it's not really like a straightforward climbing day. You know what I mean? Like there's some wind at play, and I think Faulkner still, she could do something insane with the GC with how good she's riding right now. Yep,
I agree. And yeah, it's cross tailwind going into the final climb tomorrow, which is the harder of the two climbs in gradient. Although the first climb is 18 kilometers long, but it doesn't really kick up until the very end. But Elisa Lamborghini perhaps would do better tomorrow than she will with the longer climbs later in the race. But she's another kind of unknown when it comes to these climbing stages. Like, she's been a super good climber in the past. She tends to lead towards like a poppy climber, as we saw at Tour of Flanders. But you kind of don't know with this week so early in the stage racing season, not having seen many of these riders on long climbs.
Yeah, for sure. And the wind, like after the GPM too, tomorrow, the first GPM, I think around like just before 70K is like direct crosswind after it. So you got like a couple valleys that maybe teams will try and split it if they're trying to put pressure on GC riders or the non-GC riders, depending on their strategy. But yeah, I kind of wonder what Canyon will do as well, what their play is.
Still have Ricardo Bauernfeind, who will be a huge asset to Kasia, and Antonia Niedermeyer. So she does have numbers when it comes to it, but those two both struggled in the wind today. So if there's wind at play tomorrow, it might be another situation where perhaps Kasia is the one who's the GC rider who's kind of caught out without a teammate.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for us. We'll be back after the 6th stage. So stay tuned to the Wheel Talk podcast, and thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Jill, for this mini chat.
Our final segment today is actually going to be in Escape After Dark. It's called Trick or Treat. I'll leave it at that. If you remember, hang out. We will still be here. We come back after a little musical interlude. If you are not a member, this is the end of the show. Thanks, as always, for listening. Leave us a rating, leave us a comment. All that stuff really helps other people find this podcast. We appreciate you, and we'll be back next week.